Yo, what is up, guys? It is officially October, which means, in my opinion, it's the best time of year to be riding motorcycles. The weather's getting a little cooler, the dirt's really hanging on to that moisture, the leaves are turning orange. There's a bunch of fun fall events and races, but most importantly, for pro motocross racers like myself, it marks the beginning of the off season. For me, there's no important races for a long time because I don't do supercross, and that means it's a pretty unique time for me where I get to just dial the speed way back, try and get the technique and the form and everything just absolutely perfect and not worry about, having to enter a corner too fast. And sometimes it's easy to throw those fundamentals straight out the window for the sake of speed, and it's something I haven't been able to work on in a really long time due to the injuries that I've suffered the last 3 years during the off season. I feel myself doing stuff on the track that I know isn't right, but I just hold the gas on and kind of make it work. And it's fast, but it's not very safe. And I think that's been contributing to why I've been getting all those injuries. But finally, I'm healthy going into an off season. I'm really excited to just dial the speed back and really get the fundamentals locked in, and hopefully head into the 2026 season a way more solid rider. And the best way to keep me accountable is to take you guys along for the ride and make some videos about it. So starting today, instead of just playing a POV, I'm gonna put some voiceovers over it and talk you guys through kind of my thought process, what I'm thinking of on that day, point out things in the video that I'm doing right or that I'm doing wrong. If there are some things that you guys wanna know more about, drop them down in the comments, let me know, because chances are I need to improve in that area myself, and hopefully I can help you guys improve in that area as well. So today we're heading out to Delta Raceway, and we are focusing on sort of mid-corner and corner entry flow and just kind of navigating our way through difficult ruts that are by no means perfect, and just some little things that you guys can do to hopefully help you smooth out those long ruts, get through them a little bit quicker, and drop your lap times. So I'm gonna throw you guys on the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 POV camera, and we'll get this voiceover cooking for you guys. So let's jump into it. All right, guys, welcome to Delta Raceway in Delta, Ohio. The original dirt here is that type of insanely rock hard concrete that just doesn't till up well. Not very fun to ride in, but the owner and the crew have been working really hard over the last couple of years, bringing a bunch of sand in and mixing it in, and they actually have it in a really good place right now. There's a nice top layer of kind of sandy loam, but there's still that really hard base underneath. It's a pretty interesting mixture, and it makes it really difficult late in the evenings because in the morning it's kind of loamy and you feel like you can just move the bike all around the track and be really aggressive on the throttle, and the ruts feel like they're going to be sort of sandy ruts that you can reshape all day long. And when you're on a sand track, that's not a big deal because the ruts stay nice and soft. But what makes it difficult here is that if you don't make perfect ruts in the morning, they're going to turn into concrete after like the second or third session, and so all those little hooks and double apexes and imperfections are just going to lock in insane. It makes it really hard to get through these ruts smoothly, which is perfect because these are definitely the conditions that I struggle in and I need improvement in. And that's probably true for everyone. And there's two main things that I'm going to be focusing on today. One has to do with technique, sort of body position, and then the other one is relating to, sort of speed, throttle, and braking inputs. And we'll start off with the riding position. I grew up in the sand. I'm tall, lanky, sort of like a Jeffrey Hurling style. I like to hang off the back of the bike, kind of let the bike do what it wants to, and I have a pretty reactive style, which is good in the sand because you don't really want to try and control your bike too much in the sand. It's more like riding a boat. You're kind of just nudging it in the direction you want it to go, and then you're reacting to the unpredictability of the dirt. You don't really want to be muscling the front end in the sand. You want to keep the front end light and just kind of float that rear tire around in the berms. But when you get in this hard pack, square edgy clay ruts, it takes a very different riding style. You really have to be more up over the front and very precise with your front tire. And instead of having a reactive style like in the sand, you really have to have a proactive style. Get your chest and head and shoulders really far out in front of the bike and feel like you're leading the bike around with your upper body, really keeping good weight on your front tire to retain traction in your front tire, because in the sand you always have some good dirt to keep your front end kind of planted. But a lot of the times in these hard pack situations, it's a mixture of steering the bike down these really flat, slippery straightaway surfaces and trying to particularly place that front tire into these ruts, because The ruts are not like sandy berms where it doesn't matter where you enter. There's a very precise point. You don't want it too far outside or too far inside. So it's important that you're not letting the bike ride you around and you're not letting the bike just get out of your control. You really want to feel like you're leading the bike around with your head and shoulders and sort of more muscling the front end. It's definitely, in my opinion, a more difficult and scary way to ride a motorcycle because a lot of people do not have trust in their front end. I'm sort of that way. I think I'm getting better at it recently, but still really scary for me when I see a slick entrance to a corner and I know that I've got to put a lot of weight into that front end and just trust that it's going to bite and I'm going to be able to steer it into that rut. But you can definitely see it in the techniques of, you know, the new crop of riders that are coming up, like the Lawrence brothers, Chase Sexton, Cole Davies, guys like that. And then in the old crop of riders, the guys who are typically good in the rutted hard pack, like Ken Roxon, very neutral or over the front of the bike riding style. Then you can take a look at guys like Eli Tomac or Jeffrey Hurlings or Zach Osborne, even very far off the back of the bike. Typically sand specialists, they really let it hang out in softer conditions, but maybe don't always have the best results on super hard pack. I for sure fall into the second category of riders. I'm much better in the sand than hard pack, so I'm really studying guys like Chase Sexton and Jet Lawrence to get better at that, and for sure keeping my head and shoulders out in front of the bike and just feeling like my upper body is always one step ahead of the bike really helps me track through these hard pack ruts. So things to pay attention to in this video: maybe you're seeing a little bit less of my gas tank and handlebars and a little bit more of my front fender. And then just a couple feet before I get into each rut, you might just feel the sensation that my upper body starts leaning over and then the bike starts to follow my upper body and starts leaning over into the rut afterwards. It also really puts an emphasis on just carrying your momentum smoothly through the corner, because when you have that big of a lean angle, you can't aggressively hit the brakes and come down to a really slow point in the corner because you're just going to fall over. It really promotes you staying off the brakes a little bit more and carrying your speed and bringing your lowest speed up a little bit to allow yourself to be able to maintain that lean angle. Which brings me nicely to my second focus point of the day, which is the speed and braking zone and acceleration side of things. What I'm really focusing on is sort of making the track one speed, bringing my highest mile an hour down a little bit and bringing my lowest mile an hour up a little bit. If we were to graph the speed of a section, like let's say we had a long straightaway into a tight 180 corner down the next straightaway, this is sort of what it would look like. You know, you start out slow exiting the first corner, you accelerate to, you know, let's call it 40 miles an hour, hard on the brakes into the next corner, and let's say you get down to, I don't know, 10 miles an hour in the next corner. You kind of sit at 10 miles an hour while you're going through the apex, and then you start to accelerate again down the next straightaway. What I'm really trying to focus on is not increasing my top mile an hour. You know, I'm not trying to focus on getting up to 45 miles an hour down the straightaway. What I'm trying to focus on is increasing my lowest mile an hour from, you know, that 10 that we talked about up to maybe 12, 13, you know, something a little bit higher. Because the truth is, you spend a lot more time at your lowest mile an hour than you do at your absolute peak. You know, you're only going to barely scrape 40 miles an hour at the very fastest point down a straightaway, but you're going to be spending a lot of time down at 10 miles an hour if you go through every corner at 10 miles an hour. So even though increasing your max mile an hour up to 45 might feel like you're going a lot faster, it's really only like 12% faster, and it's for a very short amount of time. Whereas if you can bring your lowest mile an hour from, let's say, 10 to 14 miles an hour, that's a 40% increase, and you're doing it for a much longer period of time. You could even afford to bring your top mile an hour down a little bit and start slowing down for the corner a little bit earlier, with the focus being on not slowing down as abruptly or slowing down as much, and just carrying that speed a little bit deeper into the corner. So this alone is really going to bring your average mile an hour up. But obviously, if you're accelerating down the next straightaway, starting off accelerating from 12 or 13 miles an hour is not going to take as much or as aggressive acceleration to get back up to your speed down the next straightaway as it will if you start out at 10 miles an hour. There are plenty of guys who make a lot of noise, have a lot of body English, and they look seriously impressive going through a section. And then here comes Jet Lawrence. Literally almost sounds like he's on an electric bike. You don't hear him on the throttle at all, but he just barely uses his brakes. He doesn't slow down that much. He has incredible roll through speed, and that allows him to not have to accelerate very hard coming out of the corner. That's sort of the feeling that we're going for today. So you guys may notice I'm not really gassing it extremely extremely hard down these straightaways, not waiting until the last second to get on the brakes. I'm doing a little bit more backing down at the ends of these straightaways and just focusing on not decelerating as much, carrying my speed as deep into the corners as I possibly can. And one drill that's really good that I like to focus on, I'm not even sure if I would call it a drill, but more so a checkpoint. The later I'm able to get on the throttle in the corners, that's when I know that I'm riding well. Seems a little counterintuitive. You would think that getting on the throttle earlier would mean that you're going faster. If you have to get on the throttle really early in the corner, it's because you didn't carry enough speed through the first half of the corner, and you have to use the throttle to keep yourself from falling over, basically. Even though there are a lot more factors on a motocross track than a road race track, the throttle and braking points should theoretically be pretty much the same. You have a gradual braking all the way to the apex of the corner, and then once you get on the throttle, it's a one gradual acceleration of the throttle. You'll never hear Max Verstappen in his Formula One car really hard on the brakes and then tap the throttle a couple of times in the beginning of the corner and then get back on the brakes and then finally accelerate out of a corner. He's always going to be gradual braking until the apex, and then once he transitions from braking to throttle, it's all throttle from there on out. And that is what the best motocross racers in the world also do. I know we don't have a lot of helmet cam footage of the top pros anymore due to helmet cams being banned at nationals, but the MXGP riders like Tim Geiser oftentimes do wear helmet cams because they're still allowed overseas at the MXGPs. So I would encourage you guys to go watch those. Or go back in time, watch some from like Villapoto, James Stewart, or one of the best at it is Ken Roczen. Almost sounds like the audio isn't synced up properly to the video because he's getting on the throttle so late in the corners, but the reason that is because he's just not braking enough to make him need to get on the gas early. If you were to close your eyes and listen, it doesn't sound fast, but if you turn the audio off and just looked at it, it looks incredibly fast, and that's because it is incredibly fast. Everybody wants to make as much noise as possible, but the reality is that the less noise you're making, oftentimes the faster you're going. So you may notice in this video that I'm putting an emphasis on that. I'm really trying to not get on the throttle until very late in the corner, and it's a nice drill because it takes away the need to think about the beginning of the corner, because if you focus on not being on the throttle until late in the corner, it's naturally just going to make you carry that speed through the beginning of the corner without even trying to think of that. So I'll go ahead and play the same corner back to back, one where I do the technique that I'm talking about, and then one where I come in too fast, too hard on the brakes, and then I have to blop, 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 tap the throttle a couple times to keep myself from falling over, and you can see the difference for yourself. Hopefully that was a good demonstration. In that first one, you can really see and feel that extra speed that I'm carrying through the beginning of the corner. And then once I do switch over from braking to throttle, it's just one motion. It's like I'm doing a whole shot coming out of the corner. And honestly, it's really fun because it's basically just free, safe speed. We go back to talking about increasing your top mile an hour. That actually is more dangerous because you're going faster. If you crash at 45 miles an hour versus 40 miles an hour, that's a big increase in risk. But if your focus is on bringing your mile an hour from 10 up to 12, that's much less of a risk. Crashing at 12 miles an hour is not much of a deal compared to crashing at 10 miles an hour. And so if that's your focus for the entire day, is just every corner bringing your lowest mile an hour up a couple of mile an hour, you're gonna unlock so much speed. It's gonna feel effortless and easy, and it's not gonna be any scarier or more dangerous. And it's really where you see guys like Jet just be so much better. It's not like his bike is faster and he's able to go 10 miles an hour faster down the straightaways. He's just going 1 or 2 miles an hour faster faster on the slowest parts of the track. And I think focusing on that will really help you guys out. Another thing you can focus on to try and replicate that feeling is, a lot of people are just laser focused on the very beginning of the rut the whole way down the straightaway, and they're like panicking, I need to get down to my 10 miles an hour at the very beginning of the rut. But something you can start doing is looking down past more to the middle of the rut and sort of pick out a point down there where that's where you're gonna reach your lowest mile an hour. And like I talked about before with leaning with your head and shoulders, when you very first start to turn the bike, you just want to feel like you're leaning your head and shoulders down to that point in the corner where you want to be at your slowest mile an hour. You don't have to physically look at the middle of the corner because you definitely want to be paying attention to the ground that's in front of you, but it's just a subconscious feeling and just feeling like you are leaning your body into that area of the corner rather than panic braking into the beginning of the corner and then starting your lean. And of course, a lot of what I'm talking about is only in a theoretical perfect rut. And that's why coming out today was so awesome, because these ruts are definitely not perfect. In some of these double apexes, you are going to have to get on the gas earlier to keep your bike upright, just because the radius of the corner is going to change. And, in the beginning, you might need your bike leaned over a little more, but then through the middle section, you need to stand the bike upright a little bit more. And that's going to cause you to have to give it a little bit of gas. And then when you get to the second hook, you need the bike leaned back over again. So you're going to have to decelerate again. So those are the adaptations you're going to have to get comfortable with after, repetition. But it's still much better than just coming to a dead stop at the beginning of the corner and having 7 different acceleration and braking zones throughout the corner. I still think it's going to help you guys out a lot. And I can definitely feel myself flowing through the beginning of these corners a lot better. From here, it's just really dialing in the correct amount of lean angle for what speed you're coming into these corners with. And once you can get those two, the speed and the lean angle dialed in, it's really going to improve your corners. And hopefully it's going to help mine as well. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of the... I don't even know what to call it really. If I am gonna name this series, maybe you guys can help me name it. But yeah, you'll have to let me know if you like this sort of thing. It's fun for me to make. It helps set those fundamentals, in stone in my own mind, and hopefully it's helping you guys out as well. Depending on how long this was, I'll probably let the Insta360 footage play to give you guys a chance to sort of listen without my voiceover and kind of see if I really am following my words and trying to put them into action out on the track. There's definitely corners I did it, some corners I screwed it up. Hopefully you guys will be able to sort of see and feel that and see what it does to my lap times. So I'm gonna let that play for a bit. Thank you guys very much for tuning into this video. I hope it helped you out, and more to come. We'll see you guys soon. Peace.